The blood on her dress had turned from crimson to rust brown, and Jasmine Reed knew she was dying on the dusty floor of the Silver Rose Saloon when the righteous people of Julian, California turned their backs on her in the spring of 1882. She had been standing at the bar when the argument erupted, two miners fighting over claims and whiskey and God knew what else. The knife had come out of nowhere, meant for someone else entirely, but it found her side instead. The pain had dropped her to her knees, and then she was on the floor, watching her own blood pool beneath her while the saloon emptied faster than water through a sieve. The other girls from the saloon hovered nearby, their painted faces pale with fear, but none of them knew what to do. Jasmine pressed her hand against the wound, feeling the hot wetness seep between her fingers, and tried to breathe through the terror. Marjorie, the saloon owner, had sent someone running for Doc Henderson. Jasmine remembered that much through the haze of pain. She remembered the way the doctor had appeared in the doorway, his black bag in hand, his face carved from stern righteousness. She remembered the way his eyes had traveled over her, taking in her rouge and her silk dress and the place where she lay. And she remembered the exact moment when his expression had hardened into something cold and final. "I will not treat a woman of ill repute," he had said, his voice carrying across the suddenly silent room. "My services are for respectable citizens of this town, not for those who have chosen a path of sin and degradation. Perhaps this unfortunate incident will serve as a warning to others who might consider following such a shameful path." Jasmine had tried to speak, tried to tell him that she was a person, that she was hurt, that she did not want to die, but the words would not come. The pain was too great, stealing her breath and her voice. She had watched him turn and walk away, his back straight and unbending, and she had known that this was how her life would end. 23 years old, and she would die on the floor of a saloon because she was not considered worthy of saving. That was when the cowboy had stepped forward from the small crowd that remained. Jasmine had seen him before, though she had never spoken to him. Xavier McAllister was his name, and he worked on one of the ranches outside town. He came into Julian every few weeks for supplies, a tall man with sun-weathered skin and dark hair that curled at his collar. She had noticed him because he was different from most of the men who came into the Silver Rose. He never came inside, never looked at the girls with that particular hunger or contempt. He simply went about his business with quiet efficiency and then rode out again. Now he was kneeling beside her, his hands gentle as he examined the wound. His eyes were a startling blue-green, like the shallow parts of a mountain stream, and they held no judgment when they met hers. "Can you hear me?" he asked, and his voice was low and steady. Jasmine managed a small nod. The movement sent fresh waves of pain through her side, and she gasped. "The wound is deep," Xavier said, looking up at Marjorie. "She needs a doctor, and she needs one now, or she will not make it through the night." "Doc Henderson refused her," Marjorie said, wringing her hands. Her face was stricken, caught between fear and fury. "He said he would not treat her because of what she is." Xavier's jaw tightened, a muscle jumping in his cheek. He looked back down at Jasmine, and something in his expression shifted. It was as though he was making a decision, weighing something important in his mind. "I know a doctor," he said finally. "In Ramona. It is about 50 miles from here, maybe a little less if we cut through the hills. He is a good man, and he will help her." "She cannot ride 50 miles in this condition," one of the other girls protested. "She will die before you get halfway there." "Then I will have to ride fast and bring him back here," Xavier said. He stood, his movements quick and purposeful. "Keep pressure on the wound. You have clean cloth. Boil water if you can, and keep the wound as clean as possible. I will be back with the doctor as soon as I can manage it." "Why are you doing this?" Jasmine whispered, finding her voice at last. The question felt important, necessary. Men did not help women like her without expecting something in return. That had been the first lesson she had learned in this life. Xavier looked at her for a long moment, his eyes searching her face. "Because you are hurt and you need help," he said simply. "That is reason enough." Then he was gone, his boots striking hard against the wooden floor as he ran. Jasmine heard the sound of a horse outside, hoofbeats thundering away into the gathering dusk. She closed her eyes and tried to hold on, tried to keep breathing, tried to believe that maybe, just maybe, she would survive this night. The hours that followed were a blur of pain and fevered darkness. The girls did their best, following the instructions Xavier had given them. They pressed clean cloth against the wound, changed the bandages when they soaked through, brought her water that she could barely swallow. Marjorie sat beside her, holding her hand, murmuring prayers and promises that everything would be all right. But Jasmine could feel herself slipping away, her body growing colder despite the warmth of the spring night, her thoughts becoming scattered and strange. She dreamed of her childhood, of the small farm in Missouri where she had grown up. She dreamed of her mother's face, worn with work and worry, and her father's hands, calloused and strong. She dreamed of the day the fever had taken them both, leaving her orphaned at 16 with nowhere to go and no one to turn to. She dreamed of the long journey west, the promises of opportunity and new beginnings that had turned to ash in her mouth. She dreamed of the choices she had made, the ones that had led her to this place, to this life, to this moment of dying on a saloon floor. When she opened her eyes again, the light had changed. Dawn was breaking outside the windows, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. She wondered if this was the last sunrise she would ever see. The thought made her unutterably sad. She had wanted more from life than this. She had wanted love and kindness and a place to belong. She had wanted to matter to someone, to be seen as more than just a painted woman in a saloon. But those dreams seemed very far away now, as distant and unreachable as the stars. "He will come back," Marjorie said, noticing that Jasmine's eyes were open. The older woman's face was haggard, dark circles under her eyes. She had not slept, had kept vigil through the long night. "That cowboy, Xavier, he will come back with the doctor. You just have to hold on a little longer." Jasmine wanted to believe her, but belief required strength she no longer possessed. She closed her eyes again and let the darkness take her. The sound of hoofbeats brought her back. At first, she thought she was dreaming, but then she heard voices, urgent and commanding. Someone was calling for boiled water, for clean cloth, for more light. Hands touched her, professional and sure, and pain flared bright and terrible as the wound was examined. She cried out, or thought she did, but the sound seemed to come from very far away. "The blade went deep, but it missed the vital organs," a voice said, gravelly with age but steady with certainty. "She has lost a great deal of blood, and infection is a serious risk, but if we can clean the wound and close it properly, she has a chance. A good chance if she is strong." "She is strong," Xavier's voice said, and even through the pain, Jasmine felt something warm bloom in her chest at the conviction in his tone. "She has held on this long. She will make it." The doctor began to work, and the pain became everything. Jasmine felt the wound being cleaned, felt the needle piercing her skin as stitches were placed with careful precision. She tried to be brave, tried not to scream, but the agony was overwhelming. Strong hands held her down, kept her from thrashing, and through it all, she heard Xavier's voice, low and continuous, telling her she was doing well, telling her it would be over soon, telling her to hold on. Finally, mercifully, it was done. The doctor bandaged the wound with clean white cloth. And then Jasmine felt the coolness of a damp rag on her forehead. She opened her eyes and found Xavier kneeling beside her, his face drawn with exhaustion but his eyes filled with relief. "The doctor says you will live," he told her, and she saw his throat work as he swallowed. "You will have to rest and heal, but you are going to be all right." "You came back," Jasmine whispered. Her voice was barely audible, roughened by pain and screaming. "I said I would," Xavier replied. He managed a tired smile. "I rode through the night. My horse is about ready to collapse, and I am not far behind him, but we made it. Dr. Brennan here is the finest physician I know, and he did not hesitate when I told him someone needed help." An older man appeared in Jasmine's line of sight, his white beard neatly trimmed, his eyes kind behind wire-rimmed spectacles. "Any physician worthy of the name treats those who need treatment," Dr. Brennan said firmly. "I am sorry that you had to suffer through the night because someone forgot that fundamental principle. But you are going to recover, young lady. You will need to stay off your feet for at least 2 weeks, and you must keep the wound clean and watch for any signs of infection. But with proper care, you should heal completely." Tears slipped down Jasmine's face, not from pain but from overwhelming relief and gratitude. "Thank you," she managed to say. "Thank you both. I do not know how I can ever repay you." "There is no debt," Dr. Brennan said gently. "Now rest. Your body needs time to heal." He gave instructions to Marjorie about caring for the wound, left packets of herbs and powders for preventing infection and managing pain, and then he took his leave. Xavier walked him outside, and Jasmine could hear their voices through the open window, though she could not make out the words. When Xavier returned, he looked uncertain, as though he was not sure whether he should stay or go. "Will you be all right now?" he asked, standing awkwardly near the door. "Is there anything else you need? You should rest," Jasmine said. "You must be exhausted after riding all night." "I am tired," Xavier admitted, "but I wanted to make sure you were settled before I left." "I am settled," Jasmine assured him. "Thanks to you, I am going to live." "I owe you my life, Xavier McAllister." He shook his head. "You do not owe me anything. I only did what anyone should have done." "But you were the only one who did it," Jasmine said softly. "Everyone else, even the doctor who took an oath to help people, they all decided I was not worth saving." "But you decided differently. Why?" Xavier was quiet for a long moment, his eyes distant. "My sister," he said finally. "Her name was Elizabeth. She fell in love with the wrong man when she was 17, and when things went badly, she found herself in a difficult position. Our parents turned their backs on her. The good people of our town shunned her. She ended up working in a place like this, doing what she had to do to survive. One night, there was a fire. The building burned and she was trapped inside. People stood in the street and watched it burn, and no one tried to help because they said she was a fallen woman, that she had brought her fate upon herself. She was 18 years old when she died." Jasmine felt her heart clench with sympathy and sorrow. "I am so sorry," she whispered. "It was 10 years ago," Xavier said, his voice rough with old grief. "I was 16 and I could not save her. I tried, but I was too late. Ever since then, when I see someone in trouble, someone the world has decided is not worth helping, I think of Elizabeth. I think about how she deserved better, how she deserved kindness and a second chance. So when I saw you lying there, bleeding and afraid, and I heard that pompous fool of a doctor refuse you, I knew I could not stand by and do nothing. Not again." "Your sister would be proud of you," Jasmine said, her voice thick with emotion. Xavier gave her a sad smile. "I hope so. Now rest, Jasmine Reed. Heal and get strong. The world can be a hard place, but you survived tonight, and that is no small thing." He left then, and Jasmine was alone with Marjorie and the other girls. They fussed over her, making her as comfortable as possible on a makeshift bed they had prepared in one of the upstairs rooms. The saloon was closed for the day, the doors locked and the windows shuttered, and the quiet was a blessing after the chaos of the night. Jasmine slept, and when she woke, it was afternoon. The pain was still there, a constant throb in her side, but it was manageable. Marjorie brought her broth and water, helped her drink, and then settled into a chair beside the bed. "That cowboy," Marjorie said, studying Jasmine with shrewd eyes. "He is a good man. They are rare, but they exist. Xavier McAllister might just be one of them." "He saved my life," Jasmine said quietly. "He did more than that," Marjorie replied. "He showed you that you matter, that your life has value. Do not forget that, Jasmine. Whatever you do, do not forget it." The days that followed were slow and painful. Jasmine was not accustomed to lying still, to being helpless and dependent on others. But her body demanded rest, and she had no choice but to give it. The wound healed slowly, the stitches holding firm, and Dr. Brennan rode out from Ramona twice more to check on her progress. Each time, he pronounced himself satisfied, saying that she was recovering well and that she had been fortunate. Xavier came to visit on the third day after the incident. He brought wildflowers, a small bouquet of lupines and poppies that he had clearly picked himself. He looked embarrassed as he handed them to her, as though he was not sure whether such a gesture was appropriate. "I thought they might brighten the room," he said, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. "How are you feeling?" "Better," Jasmine said, taking the flowers and breathing in their faint, sweet scent. No one had ever brought her flowers before, not in all her life. The simple gesture touched her more deeply than she could express. "The pain is less each day, and Dr. Brennan says I am healing well." "I cannot thank you enough for what you did, Xavier. You and Dr. Brennan saved my life." "I am glad you are recovering," Xavier said. He pulled up a chair and sat down, his hat in his hands. "I have been thinking about you, wondering how you were doing. The people in town are talking, you know." "About what happened, about Doc Henderson refusing to treat you. Some folks are angry about it, saying he should not have turned away someone in need. Others agree with him, saying he was right to stand on principle. It has caused quite a division." "I imagine it has," Jasmine said with a bitter smile. "People love to argue about the morality of women like me. They rarely bother to ask us how we ended up here or what choices we actually had." Xavier looked at her thoughtfully. "If you do not mind me asking, how did you end up here?" "You do not have to tell me if you do not want to. I am just curious about your story." Jasmine was silent for a moment, considering. She had never told anyone the full truth of her past, had learned early that most people did not care to hear it. But something about Xavier made her want to be honest, to let him see the real person beneath the painted facade. "I was born in Missouri," she began slowly. "My parents had a small farm and we were happy, even though we did not have much. But when I was 16, a fever swept through the county. It took my parents within days of each other, and suddenly I was alone. The farm was mortgaged and there was debt I could not pay. I had no other family, no one to turn to. The bank took the land and I had nothing." She paused, gathering her thoughts. Xavier waited patiently, his eyes on her face. "I heard about opportunities in California," she continued. "People said there was work, that you could make a new start. So I used what little money I had to buy passage on a wagon train heading west. I thought I would find work as a seamstress or a cook, something respectable. But when I got here, I found that respectable work was hard to come by for a young woman on her own. The positions that existed paid almost nothing, barely enough to keep body and soul together. I tried for a while, worked in a laundry, but the wages were so low that I could not afford food and lodging both." Jasmine swallowed hard, the memories painful even after all this time. One night, I was truly desperate, had not eaten in 2 days, and I met Marjorie. She owned the Silver Rose and she offered me a position. She said I would have a room, meals, safety. All I had to do was entertain the customers, make them feel welcome and special. She was honest about what that meant, about what the work would entail. And I was so hungry, so tired, so afraid that I said yes. I told myself it would be temporary, that I would save money and move on to something better. But the weeks turned into months and the months turned into years, and here I am. 23 years old, and this is my life. Xavier's expression was unreadable, but his eyes held something that might have been understanding. "You did what you had to do to survive," he said quietly. "There is no shame in that." "Most people would disagree with you," Jasmine said. "To them, I am a sinner, a woman of loose morals who has brought disgrace upon herself. They think I enjoy this life, that I chose it freely. They do not understand that sometimes there are no good choices, only choices between survival and destruction." "I understand," Xavier said, and his voice carried the weight of truth. "My family was poor, so poor that there were nights when we went to bed hungry. My father worked himself to death trying to provide for us, and my mother was not far behind. When Elizabeth made her mistake, my parents were so consumed by shame and what the neighbors would think that they could not see she needed help, not condemnation. I watched the way people treated her, the way they looked at her, and I learned that righteousness often has a cruel face. So when people like Doc Henderson stand on their principles and let someone suffer, I see it for what it is. It is not morality. It is cowardice and cruelty dressed up in fine words." Jasmine felt tears prick her eyes. To be understood, to be seen as a whole person rather than a symbol of sin or virtue, was such a rare gift that she hardly knew how to receive it. "You are a remarkable man, Xavier McAllister," she said softly. He shook his head, looking uncomfortable with the praise. "I am just a cowboy trying to live right and make up for the times I could not help when it mattered. But I am glad I was there that night, Jasmine. I am glad I could help you." They talked for a while longer, the conversation flowing easily despite their different worlds. Xavier told her about the ranch where he worked, about the cattle and the horses and the wide open spaces. He spoke of dawn breaking over the hills, of the satisfaction of hard work, of the companionship of the other ranch hands. Jasmine found herself fascinated by his stories, by the glimpse they offered into a life so different from her own. When he finally left, promising to visit again soon, Jasmine felt something unfamiliar stirring in her chest. It took her a while to identify the feeling, and when she did, it frightened her. It was hope. Xavier came back 2 days later and then again 2 days after that. Each visit was longer than the last, the conversation ranging over everything from books to beliefs to dreams for the future. Jasmine found herself looking forward to his visits with an eagerness that both thrilled and terrified her. She was a saloon girl, and he was a cowboy with principles and a good heart. There was no future in whatever was growing between them, no possibility of anything beyond these stolen conversations. But she could not help the way her heart lifted when she heard his footsteps on the stairs, could not stop the smile that came to her face when he appeared in the doorway. By the end of the second week, Jasmine was able to get out of bed and walk around the room, though the movement pulled at her stitches and made her wince. Dr. Brennan had come to check on her that morning and had pronounced her recovery excellent. He had removed the stitches with gentle efficiency, leaving behind a puckered scar that would fade with time. "You are a fortunate young woman," he had told her. "Another few hours without treatment, and you would not have made it. That cowboy friend of yours showed remarkable determination in riding for help. You owe him a great debt." "I know," Jasmine had replied. I intend to pay it if I can." That afternoon, when Xavier came to visit, Jasmine was sitting in a chair by the window, dressed in a simple cotton dress that Marjorie had lent her. She had washed her face clean of paint and pinned her dark hair back in a simple style. Xavier paused in the doorway when he saw her, and something flickered in his eyes. "You look different," he said, then flushed. "I mean, you look well, rested." "I am feeling much better," Jasmine said. "Dr. Brennan removed the stitches this morning. He says I should be able to return to regular activities within a few days, though I need to be careful not to strain the injury." Xavier nodded, but she saw a shadow cross his face at the mention of returning to regular activities. He knew what that meant, knew that she would go back to working in the saloon, back to the life that had almost cost her everything. The thought clearly troubled him, but he said nothing. "Xavier," Jasmine said, making a decision, "will you sit with me? There is something I want to tell you." He sat, his expression curious and concerned. Jasmine took a breath, trying to find the right words. "These past 2 weeks, your visits have meant more to me than I can say," she began. "You have treated me with kindness and respect, as though I were a proper lady rather than a woman from the Silver Rose. You have talked to me about real things, asked my opinions, listened to what I have to say. You have made me feel like a person, Xavier, like someone who matters. And I want you to know that I will never forget that. Whatever happens next, I will carry the memory of your goodness with me always." Xavier leaned forward, his eyes intent on her face. "What do you mean, whatever happens next? Are you planning to leave Julian?" "I do not know what I am planning," Jasmine admitted. "But I do know that I cannot go back to the way things were. Nearly dying has a way of making you see things clearly. This life I have been living, it is killing me slowly, even without knives and blood. It is killing my spirit, my hope, everything good that remains inside me. I need to find a different path, but I do not know how or where to start." "Then let me help you," Xavier said, and the intensity in his voice made Jasmine's breath catch. "Let me help you find that different path." "Why would you do that?" Jasmine asked, though her heart already knew the answer. She could see it in his eyes, in the way he looked at her, in the gentle way he spoke her name. "Because over these past 2 weeks, I have come to care for you," Xavier said simply. "I came to visit because I felt responsible for your recovery, but I kept coming because I wanted to. Because talking to you is the best part of my day. Because when I think about you going back to the saloon, it makes me feel like someone is twisting a knife in my chest. I know I have no right to these feelings. I know we come from different worlds, and I am probably 7 kinds of fool for even speaking of this. But I cannot help it, Jasmine. I care for you, and I want to help you build a better life if you will let me." Jasmine felt tears spill down her cheeks, though she was not sure whether they were from joy or sorrow or both. "You do not know what you are saying," she whispered. "You do not understand what it would mean to be connected to someone like me. The whole town knows what I am, Xavier. If you help me, if people see that we are together in any way, they will judge you. They will say terrible things. You could lose your position at the ranch, lose the respect of your friends. I cannot let you sacrifice so much for me. The opinion of people who would let a woman bleed to death on a saloon floor is not worth very much to me," Xavier said firmly. "And as for my position, well, I have some money saved, enough to make a start somewhere else if it comes to that, but I do not think it will. The foreman at the ranch is a fair man, and he judges people by their work, not by gossip. And if some folks want to talk, let them. I have weathered gossip before, and I will weather it again." "You would do all of that for me?" Jasmine asked, hardly daring to believe it. "I would do more if you needed it," Xavier said. He reached out and took her hand, his grip warm and strong and sure. "I am not a rich man, Jasmine, and I cannot offer you luxury, but I can offer you respect and protection and a chance to start over, if you want it, if you want me." Jasmine looked at him through her tears, at this good man who had ridden 50 miles through the night to save her life, who had visited her every few days to make sure she was healing, who saw her as a person worthy of love and care. She thought about all the years of loneliness, all the nights of pretending to be someone she was not, all the ways she had convinced herself that this was all she deserved. And she thought about the possibility of something different, something real and true and filled with hope. "I want it," she said, her voice trembling but clear. "I want you. I am terrified and I do not know how this can possibly work, but I want to try. If you are willing to take a chance on me, then I am willing to take a chance on you." Xavier's face broke into a smile that transformed him, making him look younger and lighter and filled with joy. He lifted her hand to his lips and kissed it gently, and Jasmine felt her heart turn over in her chest. "Then we will figure it out together," he said. "One day at a time, we will build something good and true. I promise you that, Jasmine Reed." The next few days were filled with planning and preparation. Jasmine spoke to Marjorie about leaving the saloon, and while the older woman was sad to lose her, she understood and wished her well. Marjorie even gave Jasmine some money, wages that were owed plus a little extra to help her get started. "You deserve a chance at happiness," Marjorie told her, embracing her carefully so as not to hurt her healing wound. "That cowboy of yours is a good man. Hold on to him and make a good life for yourself. And if you ever need anything, you know where to find me." Xavier found a small house to rent on the outskirts of town, a modest place with 2 rooms and a kitchen. It was not much, but it was clean and respectable, and it was a place where Jasmine could live without shame. He helped her move her few belongings, which did not take long, and then he stood in the middle of the main room and looked at her seriously. "We should do this properly," he said. "I do not want anyone to have cause to gossip about your virtue or mine. So I will sleep at the ranch for now, and I will court you the right way. I will come calling at respectable hours, and we will spend time together in public where people can see that our intentions are honorable. And when enough time has passed, when you are ready, I will ask you to marry me properly. Does that sound all right to you?" Jasmine felt warmth spread through her chest. Xavier was thinking about her reputation, about protecting her from further judgment and scorn. He was offering her not just help but true respect, treating her as though she were a proper lady. "It sounds perfect," she said softly. "Thank you, Xavier, for everything." And so a courtship began, one that set tongues wagging throughout Julian. The cowboy who had ridden 50 miles to save the saloon girl was now courting her openly, walking with her down the main street in broad daylight, sitting with her at church on Sunday mornings. Some people were scandalized, muttering about impropriety and fallen women. Others were more sympathetic, moved by the story of Xavier's heroic ride and impressed by his determination to give Jasmine a second chance. Jasmine found the scrutiny difficult at first, unused to being the center of so much attention. But Xavier was steady beside her, his presence a constant reassurance. He introduced her to people as though she were someone of importance, spoke of her with respect and admiration, and made it clear through word and deed that he considered her worthy of honor. Slowly, gradually, some of the people in Julian began to soften. The minister's wife, a kind woman named Agnes, invited Jasmine to join the ladies' sewing circle. A few of the shopkeepers began to greet her politely when she came in to make purchases. It was not universal acceptance, and there were still those who turned away when they saw her coming, but it was a start. It was more than Jasmine had ever hoped for. As spring turned to summer, Jasmine's wound healed completely, leaving only a thin scar as a reminder of that terrible night. She found work doing laundry and mending for some of the families in town, honest work that kept her hands busy and brought in a small income. It was hard labor, harder than what she had done at the saloon, but it felt clean and good, and she took pride in it. Xavier continued to court her with patience and devotion. He brought her little gifts, wildflowers and ribbons, and once a book of poetry that he had ordered from San Francisco. They took long walks together in the evenings, talking about everything and nothing, learning each other's hearts and minds. He told her more about his past, about growing up poor and losing his sister, and the years of working on various ranches, always moving, never quite settling. She told him about her parents, about the farm in Missouri, about the dreams she had carried west, and the ways those dreams had been broken and reshaped. "I used to dream about having a home," Jasmine confessed one evening as they sat together on the porch of her little house, watching the sun set over the hills. "Not a big house or a fancy one, just a place that was mine, where I belonged and felt safe. I thought that was impossible after I ended up at the Silver Rose. I thought I had lost my chance at that kind of life." "You have not lost anything," Xavier said, taking her hand. "You are building that life right now. This house, this town, this is your home if you want it to be. And I want to be part of it, Jasmine. I want to build that home with you if you will have me." Jasmine turned to look at him, her heart full. "Are you asking me what I think you are asking me?" Xavier smiled and slid off the bench to kneel before her. He pulled a small box from his pocket and opened it to reveal a simple gold ring with a tiny diamond that caught the last light of the setting sun. "Jasmine Reed, you are the bravest, strongest, most remarkable woman I have ever known. You have faced hardship and cruelty and pain, and you have survived with your spirit intact. You make me want to be a better man, to build a better life. Will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my days trying to make you as happy as you make me?" Tears streamed down Jasmine's face, but she was smiling, smiling so wide that her cheeks hurt. "Yes," she said, her voice breaking with emotion. "Yes, Xavier, I will marry you. I will be so proud to be your wife." He slipped the ring onto her finger, and then he stood and pulled her into his arms, holding her close. Jasmine rested her head against his chest and listened to the steady beat of his heart, and she felt something settle deep inside her, something that had been restless and afraid for as long as she could remember. She felt safe. She felt loved. She felt like she had finally come home. They were married in late August, on a warm Saturday afternoon at the small church in Julian. Agnes, the minister's wife, helped Jasmine make her wedding dress, a simple but beautiful gown of cream-colored cotton with lace at the collar and cuffs. Marjorie came to the wedding, sitting in the back pew with tears streaming down her face. Dr. Brennan made the journey from Ramona to attend, telling Xavier that he would not have missed it for the world. A handful of other townspeople came as well, those who had been moved by the story of Xavier's heroism and Jasmine's redemption. Doc Henderson did not attend, of course. He had made his disapproval known, preaching a sermon about the dangers of rewarding sin and the importance of maintaining moral standards. But his words fell on increasingly deaf ears. The people of Julian had seen Xavier and Jasmine's courtship, had watched the way they treated each other with tenderness and respect, and most had concluded that theirs was a genuine love story, one that spoke to the power of compassion and second chances. As Jasmine stood at the altar and looked into Xavier's eyes, listening to him speak his vows in a voice rough with emotion, she felt her past fall away like an old skin. She was no longer the desperate orphan or the saloon girl or the fallen woman. She was simply Jasmine, beloved and cherished, standing on the threshold of a new life with the man who had saved her in more ways than one. I promise to love you and honor you all the days of my life, Xavier said, his hands holding hers firmly. I promise to stand beside you in good times and bad, to be your shelter and your strength. You are my heart, Jasmine, and I will spend every day proving myself worthy of your love. I promise to love you with everything I have, Jasmine replied, her voice steady despite the tears on her face. I promise to be faithful and true, to support you and encourage you, to build a life and a home with you. You saved my life, Xavier, and I will spend mine showing you what that gift meant. I love you more than I have words to express. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Xavier kissed her gently, reverently, as though she were something precious and fragile. The small congregation erupted in applause, and Jasmine laughed through her tears, feeling joy so intense it was almost painful. The reception was held at Agnes's house, a simple gathering with cake and lemonade and much laughter. People came up to congratulate them, to wish them well, and to tell Xavier that he was a lucky man. Xavier agreed wholeheartedly every time, keeping Jasmine close to his side, his hand never leaving hers. As the afternoon wore on and the guests began to depart, Dr. Brennan pulled Xavier aside. Jasmine watched from across the room as the two men spoke quietly, their expressions serious. When they finished, Xavier shook the doctor's hand with obvious gratitude, and Dr. Brennan patted him on the shoulder like a father blessing his son. "What was that about?" Jasmine asked when Xavier returned to her side. "Dr. Brennan has offered to take me on as an apprentice," Xavier said, his eyes bright with excitement. "He says he is getting older and could use help with his practice. He wants to teach me medicine, train me to be a physician. It would mean traveling to Ramona several times a week for lessons and working with him when patients need care. But he says that in a few years I could set up my own practice, perhaps here in Julian. He thinks I have the right temperament for it, and he says he would be honored to train the man who rode 50 miles through the night to save a life." Jasmine stared at him in wonder. "Xavier, that is incredible. You would be a wonderful doctor. You have such compassion and determination. But what about the ranch? And are you sure this is what you want?" "I am sure," Xavier said firmly. "I have been thinking about it since that night, about how I felt so helpless watching you suffer, about how grateful I was that Dr. Brennan had the knowledge to save you. I want that knowledge, Jasmine. I want to be able to help people, to heal them. And if I can do that while building a life with you, then I will be the most fortunate man alive." "Then you should do it," Jasmine said, squeezing his hands. "I believe in you, Xavier. I know you will succeed." They left the reception as the sun was setting, walking hand in hand to the little house that was now truly their home. Xavier carried her over the threshold, both of them laughing at the old tradition, and then he set her down gently in the middle of the main room. The house had been cleaned and prepared, with flowers on the table and candles casting soft light over everything. Someone, probably Agnes, had left a plate of food and a bottle of wine, small luxuries to celebrate their first night as husband and wife. Xavier looked at Jasmine with an expression that made her breath catch, a mixture of love and desire and something almost like reverence. "Are you happy?" he asked softly. "I am happier than I ever thought possible," Jasmine replied honestly. "I never imagined I could have this, Xavier. A home, a husband who loves me, a future filled with hope and possibility. It feels like a dream." "It is not a dream," Xavier said, cupping her face in his hands. "This is real, Jasmine. You and me, this life we are building together, it is all real. And I am going to spend every day making sure you never doubt that you deserve all of this and more." He kissed her then, deeply and thoroughly, and Jasmine felt the last of her walls crumble. She had been so afraid for so long, afraid to trust, afraid to hope, afraid to believe that someone could love her for who she truly was. But Xavier had proven himself time and again, had shown her through action and word that his love was genuine and unwavering. She let herself fall into that love now, surrendering completely, trusting him with her heart and her body and her future. Their wedding night was tender and passionate, a claiming and a giving that left them both breathless and complete. Xavier was gentle with her, mindful of her past and the ways she might have been hurt, treating her with a care that made her feel treasured beyond measure. And when they finally lay together in the darkness, wrapped in each other's arms, Jasmine felt a peace she had never known. "I love you," she whispered into the quiet. "I love you too," Xavier replied, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Now and always." The months that followed were filled with hard work and happiness. Xavier began his apprenticeship with Dr. Brennan, traveling to Ramona 3 times a week to study anatomy and pharmacology, and the countless details of medical practice. He proved to be an apt student, his natural compassion combining with a sharp mind and steady hands to make him well suited to the work. Dr. Brennan was pleased with his progress and often told him that he had a gift for healing. Jasmine continued her work doing laundry and mending, and she also began helping Agnes with the ladies' sewing circle. The women of the circle had been wary of her at first, their acceptance grudging and conditional. But Jasmine's skill with a needle and her quiet grace gradually won them over. She never spoke about her past unless asked directly, and when questions came, she answered them with honesty and dignity, neither ashamed nor defiant. She had done what she needed to do to survive, and she refused to apologize for it. But she also made it clear that she was grateful for the chance at a different life, one she was determined to live with integrity and purpose. As the months passed, and Jasmine proved herself a devoted wife and a respectable member of the community, even some of the harshest critics began to soften. Not everyone, of course. There were those like Doc Henderson who would never accept her, who saw her as forever stained by her past. But enough people were willing to give her a chance that she began to feel like she truly belonged in Julian. Xavier was fiercely protective of her, quick to defend her if anyone spoke ill in his presence. But Jasmine learned to defend herself as well, developing a quiet strength and confidence that came from knowing she was loved and valued. She no longer flinched from judgment or cowered before condemnation. She held her head high and met people's eyes directly, daring them to see her as she truly was rather than as they assumed her to be. In the spring of 1883, a year after the night she had almost died, Jasmine discovered she was pregnant. The realization filled her with a complex mixture of joy and fear. She wanted a child desperately, wanted to build a family with Xavier and give their son or daughter all the love and security she had lost when her own parents died. But she was also afraid, haunted by memories of other women at the saloon who had found themselves with child and the difficult choices they had faced. When she told Xavier, he swept her into his arms and spun her around, laughing with pure delight. "We are going to have a baby," he said, his voice filled with wonder. "Jasmine, we are going to be parents. Are you happy?" she asked, searching his face. "Truly happy. I am overjoyed," Xavier said, setting her down gently and placing his hand on her still flat stomach. "This child is a gift, Jasmine, a symbol of the life we are building together, of the love we share. I cannot wait to meet him or her." "I want to be a good mother," Jasmine said, her voice small and uncertain. "I want to give our child everything I never had, but what if I do not know how? What if I make mistakes?" "All parents make mistakes," Xavier said gently. "But I know you, Jasmine. I know your heart and your strength and your capacity for love. You are going to be an amazing mother. And I will be right there beside you, learning and growing and probably making plenty of mistakes of my own. We will figure it out together." Dr. Brennan was delighted by the news and immediately took over Jasmine's medical care, examining her regularly and giving detailed instructions about diet and rest. He told Xavier that this was an excellent opportunity to learn about childbirth and prenatal care, subjects that many male doctors neglected, but which were crucial for a physician serving a rural community. Jasmine's pregnancy progressed smoothly, though she experienced the usual discomforts of morning sickness and fatigue. Agnes and the other women of the sewing circle rallied around her, offering advice and assistance and making tiny clothes and blankets for the coming baby. Jasmine was touched by their support, by the way they had accepted her into their circle and now treated her as one of their own. As her belly grew round with new life, Jasmine often thought about the night that had changed everything. If that miner's knife had struck just a little differently, if Xavier had not been there to take action, if Doc Henderson's refusal had been the final word, she would be dead now, buried in some unmarked grave and forgotten. Instead, she was alive and loved and carrying a child who would grow up in a home filled with kindness and respect. The contrast was almost overwhelming, a reminder of how fragile life was and how much power one person's compassion could have. In December of 1883, on a cold night when snow was falling softly outside, Jasmine went into labor. Xavier rode immediately to fetch Dr. Brennan, his heart in his throat, terrified of losing either his wife or his child. But Dr. Brennan arrived quickly and took charge with calm efficiency. He had trained Xavier well over the past months, and now Xavier assisted at the birth of his own child, his hands trembling slightly but his focus absolute. The labor was long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the next morning. Jasmine endured the pain with courage, gripping Xavier's hand so tightly that he lost feeling in his fingers, but he never once complained. He murmured encouragement to her, told her how strong she was, how proud he was of her, how much he loved her. Finally, as dawn broke over the hills and painted the snow-covered landscape in shades of pink and gold, the baby was born. A boy, healthy and strong, with a powerful set of lungs that he used to announce his arrival to the world. Dr. Brennan placed the infant in Jasmine's arms, and she looked down at her son's tiny, perfect face and felt her heart expand with a love so vast and fierce that it took her breath away. "He is beautiful," Xavier said, his voice choked with emotion. Tears streamed down his face as he gazed at his wife and child. "You did it, Jasmine. You brought our son into the world. What should we name him?" Jasmine asked, unable to take her eyes off the baby. He had stopped crying and was looking up at her with dark, unfocused eyes, his tiny hand curled into a fist. Xavier was quiet for a moment, thinking. "What about Thomas?" he suggested. "It means twin, but it also means leader, someone strong, Thomas McAllister. What do you think?" "Thomas," Jasmine repeated softly, testing the name. "I like it. Thomas McAllister. Our son." She looked up at Xavier and saw that he was still crying, saw the overwhelming love and joy on his face, and she felt her own tears begin to fall. They had been through so much, had traveled such a long and difficult road to reach this moment. But they had made it, and now they had a family, a future, a life filled with promise. Dr. Brennan congratulated them both, and then took his leave, promising to return the next day to check on mother and child. After he left, Xavier and Jasmine sat together with their son, marveling at him, at the perfection of his tiny fingers and toes, at the softness of his skin, at the miracle of his existence. "I will never let anything hurt him," Xavier said fiercely. I will protect him and love him and make sure he grows up knowing his worth. He will never be alone or afraid or without someone to turn to. He will grow up knowing he is loved, Jasmine agreed, and he will grow up seeing his father treat his mother with respect and kindness. He will learn from your example, Xavier, and he will become a good man because of it. The years that followed were full and rich. Thomas grew from an infant into a toddler, a bright and curious child who brought joy to everyone he met. Xavier completed his medical training and opened a small practice in Julian, treating patients with the same compassion and skill that Dr. Brennan had taught him. He never turned anyone away, never refused treatment based on social status or moral judgments. He remembered the night Doc Henderson had refused to help Jasmine, and he was determined to be a different kind of physician, one who saw the humanity in every patient. Doc Henderson, for his part, found his practice dwindling as more and more people chose to see Xavier instead. Some did so because they preferred Xavier's approach, his willingness to listen, and his gentle bedside manner. Others did so as a quiet statement of principle, a way of showing that they did not agree with Henderson's treatment of Jasmine all those years ago. Eventually, Doc Henderson left Julian, moving to another town where his reputation had not been tarnished. Xavier felt no satisfaction in his departure, only a sad acknowledgement that rigid principles often came at a high cost. Jasmine continued to be involved in the community, helping with the church and the sewing circle and various charitable efforts. She had a particular passion for helping young women who found themselves in difficult circumstances, offering them guidance and support, and sometimes shelter in her own home. She understood better than anyone how easily a woman could slip through society's cracks, and she was determined to provide the help she had needed but rarely received in her own youth. When Thomas was 3, Jasmine became pregnant again. This time, the pregnancy was easier, her body more prepared for the demands. She gave birth to a daughter in the summer of 1886, a beautiful girl with Xavier's blue-green eyes and Jasmine's dark hair. They named her Sarah, after Xavier's mother, and she was welcomed into the world with the same joy and wonder that had greeted her brother. Thomas was fascinated by his baby sister, constantly wanting to hold her and help care for her. Xavier and Jasmine watched their children with hearts full of gratitude, amazed by the life they had built together. They had gone from a desperate moment on a saloon floor to a home filled with love and laughter, and the transformation sometimes seemed impossible, like something from a storybook rather than real life. But it was real, built on a foundation of Xavier's compassion and Jasmine's courage, strengthened by years of work and commitment and love. They had their struggles, of course, as all families do. There were lean times when Xavier's practice brought in little money, when they had to make do with less. There were moments of disagreement and frustration, times when they hurt each other without meaning to. But they always came back to each other, always remembered the vows they had made and the love that had brought them together. As the years passed and their children grew, Xavier and Jasmine often talked about that night in 1882, the night that had changed everything. They talked about the choices made, the risks taken, the long ride through darkness that had ended in hope rather than despair. They talked about Doc Henderson's refusal and the way it had nearly cost Jasmine her life, and about the importance of compassion over judgment. You ever regret it? Jasmine asked Xavier one evening as they sat on the porch of their home, which had been expanded over the years to accommodate their growing family. The children were asleep inside, and the night was peaceful and still. Do you ever wish you had just gone about your business that night, not gotten involved? Xavier looked at her as though she had asked the most absurd question in the world. Regret it? Jasmine, That night was the beginning of everything good in my life. If I had not helped you, if I had been like everyone else who turned away, I would have missed out on the greatest blessing I could imagine. You are my heart, Jasmine. You and our children, this life we have built, it is everything to me. I could never regret the choice that led me to you. Jasmine leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling the familiar comfort of his presence. I think about the woman I was before that night, she said quietly. I was so lost, Xavier, so convinced that I did not deserve anything better, that this was all my life would ever be. And then you came along and showed me a different way. You saw value in me when no one else did, when I could not even see it in myself. You saved my life in more ways than one. You saved mine too, Xavier said, kissing the top of her head. Maybe not in such a dramatic fashion, but you did. You gave me purpose and hope and a reason to be the best man I could be. You gave me a family and a home and love beyond measure. We saved each other, Jasmine. That is what love does. In 1890, when Thomas was 7 and Sarah was 4, Jasmine gave birth to their third child, another son they named Daniel. The house was full now, chaotic with the noise and energy of 3 young children, but Xavier and Jasmine would not have traded it for anything. They watched their children grow with pride and wonder, guiding them as best they could, teaching them the values of kindness and compassion and standing up for what was right. Thomas, the eldest, was serious and thoughtful, showing an early interest in medicine like his father. He often accompanied Xavier on house calls, watching intently as his father examined patients and prescribed treatments. Sarah was bold and adventurous, always climbing trees and exploring the hills around Julian, driving her parents to distraction with her fearlessness. Daniel, the youngest, was cheerful and affectionate, the family peacemaker who could always make everyone laugh. As the children grew older, they began to ask questions about their parents' past, about how their mother and father had met. Xavier and Jasmine answered honestly, but carefully, explaining that their mother had worked in a saloon and that some people had thought less of her because of it, but that she had been brave and strong and deserving of respect. They explained about the night of the stabbing, about the doctor who had refused to help, about the long ride to Ramona to find Dr. Brennan. The children listened with wide eyes, trying to imagine their calm, capable parents in such a dramatic situation. So you saved Mama's life? Thomas asked Xavier, his voice filled with awe. I helped, Xavier said carefully. But your mother saved herself by being strong enough to hold on until help arrived. And Dr. Brennan was the one who had the skill to heal her wound. I just made sure she got the help she needed. That was very brave, Sarah declared. I want to be brave like that when I grow up. You already are brave, Jasmine told her daughter, pulling her into a hug. You are brave and strong and wonderful, and I am so proud of you. The family continued to thrive in Julian. Xavier's medical practice grew, his reputation spreading throughout the region. People traveled from neighboring towns to see him, knowing that he would treat them fairly and competently regardless of who they were. Jasmine's work helping women in difficult circumstances also expanded, and she became known as someone who could be trusted, someone who would offer help without judgment or condemnation. In 1895, when Thomas was 12, he announced his intention to follow in his father's footsteps and become a doctor. Xavier was deeply moved, though he made sure his son understood the challenges and responsibilities of the profession. He began teaching Thomas more formally, giving him books to study, and allowing him to assist with simple medical procedures under close supervision. Sarah, at 9 years old, declared that she wanted to be a veterinarian and care for animals. It was an unusual ambition for a girl, but Xavier and Jasmine encouraged her, believing that their daughter could accomplish anything she set her mind to. They had lived through enough societal judgment themselves to know that conventional paths were not always the best ones. Daniel, at 5, was too young to have firm ambitions yet, but he showed a love of storytelling and often entertained the family with elaborate tales of adventure and heroism. Jasmine thought he might become a writer someday, spinning the same kinds of stories that had captivated her in the books Xavier had given her over the years. Time moved forward, as it always does, bringing both joy and sorrow. In 1898, Dr. Brennan passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 78. Xavier was devastated by the loss of his mentor and friend, the man who had not only saved Jasmine's life but had given Xavier a profession and a purpose. They attended the funeral in Ramona, and Xavier gave a eulogy that had everyone in tears, speaking of Dr. Brennan's wisdom and kindness and the countless lives he had touched. "He was more than a teacher to me," Xavier said, his voice breaking with emotion. "He was the embodiment of what a physician should be, someone who saw the sacred duty to heal as more important than social prejudices or personal comfort. He taught me medicine, yes, but he also taught me compassion and integrity. He showed me that the most important thing a doctor can do is recognize the humanity in every patient, to see past circumstances and judgments to the person who needs help. I will carry his lessons with me for the rest of my life, and I will try every day to honor his memory by living up to the example he set." After the funeral, Jasmine held Xavier while he wept, letting him grieve the loss of a man who had meant so much to both of them. "He would be so proud of you," she told him. "Proud of the doctor you have become, proud of the man you are, proud of the family we have built. His legacy lives on in you, Xavier, and in every patient you treat with the same compassion he showed to me all those years ago." The turn of the century brought changes to Julian and to the entire country. The Wild West that Xavier and Jasmine had known in their youth was fading, giving way to modernization and progress. Railroads connected distant towns, telegraphs allowed instant communication, and new technologies transformed daily life. But some things remained constant. Love, family, compassion, courage, these were timeless, as vital in the new century as they had been in the old. As Xavier and Jasmine grew older, they watched their children mature into remarkable adults. Thomas graduated from medical school in San Francisco in 1901, at the age of 18, and returned to Julian to join his father's practice. Father and son worked side by side, treating patients with the same dedication and skill that had made Xavier respected throughout the region. Sarah, true to her ambitions, studied animal medicine and became one of the first female veterinarians in California. She faced significant prejudice and resistance, but she persevered, supported by her parents' unwavering belief in her abilities. She opened a practice in Julian specializing in treating horses and cattle, and she quickly gained the respect of local ranchers with her skill and determination. Daniel became a journalist and writer, documenting the changing West and the stories of ordinary people doing extraordinary things. He wrote about his parents' story, about the night his father had ridden 50 miles to save his mother's life, and the article was published in newspapers throughout California. It sparked a wider conversation about compassion and second chances, about the importance of treating all people with dignity regardless of their circumstances. In 1908, Xavier and Jasmine celebrated their 25th wedding anniversary. Their children organized a party, inviting friends and family from throughout the region. The house was filled with laughter and music, with stories and memories, with love and joy. Agnes, now elderly but still sharp as ever, gave a toast. 25 years ago, many of us were uncertain about this union, she said, her voice carrying across the crowded room. We wondered whether it could work, whether love could truly overcome the judgments and prejudices of society, but Xavier and Jasmine showed us that it could. They showed us that compassion and courage and commitment can build something strong and lasting. They have raised 3 wonderful children, contributed immensely to this community, and set an example that has inspired countless others. I am proud to call them friends, and I am grateful to have witnessed their love story. The party continued late into the night, and when it was finally over and the last guests had departed, Xavier and Jasmine stood together in the quiet house, looking at each other with the same love and devotion they had felt on their wedding day. 25 years, Jasmine marveled. Sometimes it feels like a lifetime, and sometimes it feels like no time at all. I would do it all again, Xavier said, pulling her into his arms. Every moment, every challenge, every joy. I would ride those 50 miles 1,000 times over if it meant ending up here with you. My hero, Jasmine said, smiling up at him. My love. My home. They kissed, and in that kiss was the history of their love, the journey they had traveled together, the life they had built from nothing but determination and hope. The years continued to pass, bringing both challenges and triumphs. Xavier and Jasmine aged gracefully, their hair turning silver, their bodies slowing, but their love remaining as strong as ever. They became grandparents when Thomas married a kind woman named Elizabeth, named in honor of Xavier's sister, and had 3 children of his own. Sarah also married, choosing a fellow veterinarian who respected her skills and supported her ambitions, and they had 2 daughters who inherited their mother's love of animals. Daniel never married, choosing instead to focus on his writing and his travels, but he remained close to his parents and siblings, always returning to Julian for holidays and celebrations. He wrote a book about the transformation of the American West, dedicating it to his parents and the enduring power of love and compassion. In 1920, when Xavier was 58 and Jasmine was 61, they sat together on the porch of their home, watching the sunset and reflecting on the life they had shared. Their grandchildren were playing in the yard, their laughter ringing out in the evening air. The town of Julian had grown and changed around them, but their home remained a constant, a place of love and safety and belonging. You remember that first conversation we had after I woke up? Jasmine asked, her hand in Xavier's. After you brought Dr. Brennan and he stitched up my wound. You told me about your sister Elizabeth, about how you could not save her. I remember, Xavier said quietly. That was the moment I knew I could not turn away from you, that I had to help no matter what it cost me. You did save her in a way, Jasmine said. By saving me, by showing compassion when others showed judgment, you honored her memory. You made sure her suffering meant something. And you changed my life, Xavier. You gave me everything: a home, a family, love, respect, a reason to wake up each morning with hope instead of despair. You gave me myself back. Xavier squeezed her hand, his eyes bright with unshed tears. And you gave me purpose and meaning. You showed me that love is not about perfection or purity or fitting into someone else's definition of what is right. Love is about seeing someone's true heart and choosing to cherish it. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Jasmine McAllister. The very best. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun sink below the hills and the stars begin to appear in the darkening sky. Nearby, their grandchildren continued to play, secure in the knowledge that they were loved and safe. It was a moment of perfect peace, a culmination of all the years of struggle and growth and building a life together. I am grateful, Jasmine said softly, for all of it. for the trials and the triumphs, for the hard times and the happy ones, for the night I almost died because it brought you into my life, for your courage in riding those 50 miles to find Dr. Brennan, for every day we have had together since then. I am grateful for it all." "As am I," Xavier said. "Every moment, every memory, every day with you has been a gift. I love you, Jasmine, now and always." "I love you too," Jasmine replied, resting her head on his shoulder. "Now and always." They remained there as full darkness fell, wrapped in each other's presence, surrounded by family, blessed beyond measure. The story that had begun on a saloon floor in a pool of blood, with a cowboy's desperate ride through the night, had become a legacy of love and compassion that would endure for generations. It was a testament to the power of seeing past judgment to the person beneath, of choosing courage over convenience, of believing that every life has value and deserves a chance at redemption. The years ahead would bring more changes, more challenges, more joys and sorrows. But Xavier and Jasmine would face them together, as they had faced everything since that fateful night in 1882. Their love story, born from desperation and compassion, had grown into something beautiful and enduring, a reminder that the most extraordinary lives often grow from the most unlikely beginnings. As they sat together under the stars, their grandchildren's laughter floating on the evening breeze, Xavier and Jasmine knew they had succeeded in building the life they had dreamed of all those years ago. They had created a home filled with love and respect, raised children who knew their worth and carried those values into the world, and proved that redemption and second chances were not just possible but precious. The cowboy who had ridden 50 miles to save a fallen woman had found his purpose and his love. The woman who had been deemed unworthy of saving had found her strength and her home. Together, they had built something that would last far beyond their own lives, a legacy of compassion and courage that would inspire others for years to come. And as the stars wheeled overhead and the night deepened around them, Xavier and Jasmine held each other close, grateful for every mile traveled, every choice made, every moment shared. Their story was complete, their love fulfilled, their lives well lived. It was, in every way that mattered, a happy ending.